I think it's a lot more complex than that
Mhm.
because, look, I've been in this business long enough to see that a lot of transactions, and I'm not saying the local home transaction is one of these, are not always good, right? There's a lot of
Mm,
transactions, especially on the trader side, where you hear about a trader being acquired. A trader was typically technically bailed out or
yeah.
salvaged from liquidation through a transaction. The press release reads a lot nicer. I
Mm,
don't think that's the case with La Colombe, obviously, but we always have to look 2 or 3 layers deeper, right?
mhm.
Because I wouldn't ask myself, well, wow, is coffee so great that all of a sudden you can build a brand at $900 million?
Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 1 of a brand new 5-part series, our second series for 2024. And joining me is returning guest, Martin Mayorga. Martin, welcome back to the podcast for the second time.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. We're going to have a very interesting conversation about the state of the coffee industry in 2024. And it is, for lack of a better term, well, I'll say it the way that I would normally say it. It's looking to be quite the clusterfuck. So we have had some interesting articles and some interesting things come out over the last few months. It is something that we've been talking about on this podcast for a couple of years. So there is the only person that I want to have this conversation with is you. Folks, before we dive into this conversation, I want to ask you a favor. I want you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to, if you can, engage on the videos as well as on social media for this content. Why? Because this series in particular is very important. It is very important that we get this information out into the industry. And so we need you to help the algorithm push this content even further. So share this series with your friends, either whether you listen to it on podcast listening apps or you listen to it on YouTube. If you're going to be at World of Coffee in Dubai, this is also going to be a topic of discussion that we're going to have live on the podcast. Today, Martin, as we talk about the general state of the coffee supply chain, I would like to invite you to give us your perspective as somebody who I deeply respect. And hands down, you were the most beloved series on the podcast in 2023, easily, by a long shot. You were a breath of fresh air for a lot of people. The truth that you spoke and the openness with which you spoke on this podcast in 2023 was something that people really saw themselves in. So, first of all, I want to really thank you for doing that. And it's why I've invited you back for this particular series. So, thank you. And I would love for you to give us an understanding of the state of the coffee supply chain as of the end of 2023.
Okay. Well, first of all, I appreciate the comments and, the positive feedback. It's always nice to hear. I
Mhm.
think, how I came into the coffee industry has kind of always made me an outsider to the coffee industry.
Okay.
And I personally don't feel like I'm part of the coffee industry for multiple reasons. But, I think we are coming into the end of a hectic year, and I think
Yeah.
we're coming into a year where, look, I think one of the things I've learned is uh, big money likes volatility and likes momentum,
Mhm.
so a stable market of any means, meaning whether it's interest rates or currency exchanges or whatever it might be, that's not where money's made, right? Money is made in the wild swings. Uh, a lot of the very, very wealthy billionaires are created during hard times and depressions and good times and, big bubbles. So I think understanding that we're basically, I think in the beginning of a pretty heavy downturn. It's important to note that. I think it's important to understand that in any industry that you're in, you can't just think about what industry you're in. You have to think about the economy you're in and the time frame of history that you're in. I think it's so much more global. Obviously, in coffee, it makes sense that it will be global because we deal with a very global trade,
Mhm.
but I think it's beyond that. I think as business owners, and this is a concern I have with the current, mentality of entrepreneurship, is people think it's just, buy at X, sell at Y, make a margin and move forward. And I think we need to understand our place, not only as a business, but as an industry within a global economy, which in 2023 is the reality. When I started this in 1995 and I was bringing coffee from Nicaragua and I was just a dumb kid thinking I was.
Folks, our first on-demand workshop, How to Become a Coffee Consultant, is now available for you to learn at your own pace, and it comes with a certificate upon completion. Go to mapperforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the show notes for more details. Support this podcast by supporting our sponsors.
Doing something nice for a family friend and making a little money, it was a lot more simple. But I think we have a globalized economy where competition is global now, right? I mean, I'm in the US market. I can only speak to my experience within the US market, but I'm competing with companies from all around the world now, where 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. So I think as a business owner, whether you're in coffee or selling mugs, whatever you're doing, you have to understand the global perspective and the global reality. And you have to do your best to train yourself to understand the variables and then the patterns so that you can be best prepared for what's coming. And I guess the example I would give too is just yesterday I went and I got blood drawn. Every 6 months, I get my blood drawn and I have markers that I make sure I follow with, whether it's my cholesterol or and I actually put it in spreadsheets. I'm kind of a spreadsheet nerd. So, but that's for me and my physical, personal kind of, you have to do that for your business, right? And the problem with your business is just like your body, I do my blood work. Well, what affects it? What I put into it and things that from the outside become internal. Same thing with your business. And if you don't understand the external, it's very hard to properly manage the internal. So I think, words that we hear in passing, whether it's inflation or interest rates, I think we have to really understand how that affects us as individual businesses so that we can have a chance of making the right decisions at the right time.
Now, we have had two big pieces of news recently. Both are on either ends of the spectrum when it comes to sort of the economics of our industry. And I'm going to present them in a way so that people can understand why we're in such an interesting time. One piece of news was that Mercon, a green coffee trader, has gone into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. On the other side, we have a story that La Colombe was bought for $900 million. Those two stories coming out at the same time is really causing some interesting behavior in the market. You see those people who have a tendency towards, toxic positivity, looking at something like what's going on with La Colombe and saying everything's going to be fine. And then on the other side of things, we have what I think is the reality of the situation, where a bloodbath has started and it's been building, and Mercon is one indicator of what's to come. Where do you think it sits?
I think it's a lot more complex than that because, look, I've been in this business long enough to see that a lot of transactions, and I'm not saying the La Colombe transaction is one of these, are not always good, right? There's a lot of transactions, especially on the trader side, where you hear about a trader being acquired. That trader was technically bailed out or salvaged from liquidation through a transaction. The press release reads a lot nicer. I don't think that's the case with La Colombe, obviously, but we always have to look 2 or 3 layers deeper, right? Because I wouldn't ask myself, well, wow, is coffee so great that all of a sudden you can build a brand at $900 million? First, let's recognize La Colombe's been around for over 25 years. So they didn't do this overnight. They found a niche in the cold brew world and they really stuck with it and built it. And, they raised VC money to get there, right? So they got very business-minded people who said, well, this is a business. Let's operate it as such and scale it and exit, which is a typical VC mentality. And then I would ask myself questions like, well, what's the deal with Chobani? Why are they looking to buy market share in coffee? Is there something going on in yogurt? I mean, everything has layers, right? So I think it's very intelligent to look through not just, wow, La Colombe sold for $900 million. Why is a yogurt company buying a coffee company? Why, is there a need to diversify and grow market share because their main product is capped out? Or, everything has a secondary and tertiary story. And so I think it's important to look at those things. I think on the trader side, it's different in the fact that, look, you have traders as massive as they are, they operate on thin margins at the end of the day. Why? In my opinion, because they run bloated, old, antiquated models where they require a lot of people, and they work off a delta, which is how much can I buy at? How much can I sell at? How much can I
Hmm.
borrow at? How much can I loan at? Well, when you're a trader, and some of these guys live off 3% net income, up to 8 or 9, and you've been borrowing at 3%, that's great. You can make money if you loan at 6, 7%. But your interest rates in the last 3 years, from 2020 to 2023, have gone from 3 to 9,
Hmm.
10%. So think about it. Your main ability to make your money, which is the delta, what you loan versus what you borrow against, just tripled. And that tripling was 6% of an increase. And your margins typically to the bottom line are 2 to 5%, maybe 2 to 6%.
Hmm.
So just the interest rate increased higher than your bottom line typically is. So I think that's happening a lot. I think, again, nothing is in a vacuum. So you have a market that's been very unpredictable and volatile. I mean, just last 2 weeks, we've had days where we have a 10-cent swing.
Mm.
So a lot of people, that's not a big deal. That's massive. And just to put it in
Mm.
perspective, one contract is about 42,000 pounds, 10 cents, and that's a container of coffee. 10 cents is $4,200. Well, if you're a big trader, you're moving thousands of containers, thousands. So $4,200 times thousands of, and you're already fixed. And there's so much more. When a lot of these traders work with clients that they sell their coffee to on a futures basis, they also give them pricing on shipping and insurance, and all that gets locked in. And the roaster knows, okay, when I get my coffee in March, it's going to come in at this price. Well, shipping rates will go up, and interest will go. Insurance will go up, and so there's a lot of lack of predictability in the trader side. And unfortunately, sometimes the pendulum swings the wrong way for people. And if you're levered out with debt, that's it. And I think we saw it happening with Mercon. And what I think people don't realize is, you know, there's this mindset of, well, it's just another trader. Who cares? Frankly, I think it's a little callous to think that, but, I've heard that a lot. And, I always say, well, people work for these traders and they feed their families working for them, whether you believe in their model or not. But more importantly, or just as importantly, we just had somebody completely disappear out of the market.
Hmm.
And what does that do? It leaves producers less options.
Hmm.
And options are the road to freedom for producers. Realistic, viable options, whether we like them or not. Now there's less options. So now the other traders that like to make money by buying low and selling higher, they see more opportunity because now
Hmm.
you have farmers that are basically desperate. So I think, it's never the thing we see on the front end. It's always like the repercussions that people don't talk about, think about, until it's just smacking them in the face. And I think we're seeing those things. We've had a massive international roasting company that just had to sell their majority share to avoid bankruptcy. We've had, there's been a lot of things. We've seen traders being bought and acquired because they were so indebted. It's just, there's a lot of things going on. And I think we have to really be aware of the lay of the land in order to, and it's not only survive. I think this is where you can succeed if you know where the chips are.
Oh, you can make a lot of money in the next couple of years if you know what you're doing. You really
Exactly.
can. So, throughout this series, we're going to have a look at the impact from the perspective of 4 different parts of the supply chain. In each of the episodes, first, we're going to take a look at from the perspective of the producer, then from the perspective of the exporter, the trader, the importer, and then we're going to take a look at it from the perspective of the roaster and the cafe owner. And then the final episode, we're going to take a look at things from the perspective of the consumer. So it's January when this is airing. We are recording this at the end of December, right at the end of December. And I have this feeling like anything could happen from now until the time that this series comes out in 3 weeks from now. So just to be clear, we are recording this and it's still the end of 2023. If anything happens in the first 2 weeks, we won't have covered it when this happens. And given the state of the global economy and geopolitics, I wouldn't be surprised. But join us in the next episode, folks, and we're going to talk about the impact of everything that's going on from the perspective of the producer. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.